Hello everyone, my name is Diana Minta. I'm a Togolese entrepreneur. I'm inviting you today to join tepdirect.com, which is Togolese entrepreneur professional directory. Free subscription is going on right now. Hurry up, join our website www.tepdirect.com. Again, www.tepdirect.com. Tep Direct, a reliable services for our community growth.
Hello, everyone.
Hi
Welcome.
everyone.
Thank you guys for joining us today. Today is Tuesday, and we are here again, our family, and we are going to talk about buying a house today. And as
Yep,
always, I'm your host, Chris Lioness, and your co-host,
Harriet
Harriella.
Lawson.
Hey, Harriella.
Hi.
So
I'm so
before we
excited.
start, before we get into our show for today, Ariella, take us through a little bit about Tep Direct, Tep Talk, and all the merch we have on sale right now.
Yeah, so just an overview of TEP Direct. So TEP Direct is a directory of entrepreneurs, businesses, services, and other things that cater around the Togolese community. So if you head on over to our website, TEP Direct, you see a full catalog of any type of business or services that are there. So for example, if you're looking for like a food caterer, you can go ahead and find one there in your community. And going into that, ways to support TEP Direct. So here we have merch, we have merchandise. If you go on to bonfire.com, the link is below in the yellow. We have sweatshirts, we have mugs, all of them are there, and we're not trying to take all your money. So we have this coupon over here for you. It says TEP100, and make sure to freely subscribe to our site too. So you too, if you have a business or service, you can be added on to our site.
All right. So our guest for today, it's not anybody new. We had him on the show a couple weeks ago, and you guys love him so much. You ask us through me, eh, because I'm the one that did the asking to bring him back. So he is back today to share some more knowledge with us. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Wonderful. All right, Mr. Wonderful.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be back.
Welcome back for part two.
Yes, I'm
We
ready.
couldn't get enough of you, so we like you had to bring it back, bring it back.
Yeah, back to
All
back
right. Yep.
championships.
Yeah, so before we start the show and we get into the nitty gritty of today's topic, let's do a little take back a little bit. And for people who maybe did not catch the show 2 weeks ago, let's start with you just giving us a little brief reintroduction of Mr. Wonderful. Who is Mr. Wonderful? What do we need to know about Mr. Wonderful?
All right. It's just wonderful. By the way,
Nah, it's
I'm
Mr. That would sound good without the Mister.
sure. I'll let you have that. Uh, yeah, wonderful is a software engineer by profession. In IT. I love software and everything related to it. I'm a senior developer as my day job, and I am a financial independence evangelist. Like I like to say it, I promote, uh, building a passive income, taking the steps especially while we are young. These are some questions that I've had to answer for myself a few years back, actually. Uh, as little as just a couple of years back. So just having conversations around that, where whenever we can sit around a table and have these sorts of conversations that lead us to more freedom. Those are the tables where you'll find me, and I love to connect. I'm a Togolese guy. I'm a family man, beautiful fiance and a daughter. Uh, yeah, and a mama's boy. So that's it.
You say I'm
That's it
a
for you.
mama's boy. All right. So Ariella, let's do a little recap of what we talked about. I keep wanting to say last week because it felt like it
Yeah.
was just last week, but it has been 2 weeks already. So let's do a little recap of that, and then we can dive right into our questions for today.
Yeah. I think like just going back and recapping, like I think one of the most important things to acknowledge is like how to be a homeowner and how to be a homeowner from an immigrant community. So I
Mhm.
think when we talked about that, I'm sorry. I think when we talked about that, it was just really insightful because like it was just eye-opening because like oftentimes like, we foresee other plans and then like step aside from home ownership in that sense. So when you talked about that, that was just like really good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we also cover renting as well, and why somebody may need to rent at a specific moment in their life, versus going ahead and buying right away if it's not financially suitable to them at that moment. But needless to say, we came to an understanding. Maybe it wasn't right. We didn't say it right away, but it's something that we we can all agree to say that renting is literally making somebody else rich, and not building equity. While when you buy your own home, you are building equity, and you could use the fact that you have your own home in way many different opportunity, like your business, for example. It has different advantages to owning a home. So with that being said, we want to have a conversation about the process of owning a home. So, Mr. Wonderful, to begin, my
Yeah.
first question of the night is, how does one decide whether they are ready to buy a house?
All right. Uh, Good question. Good question. And let's see. So just to say a little thing about whether renting or buying a house would be the ideal thing for you. I think there's definitely pros and cons. Just to not to go back to that, right? Just depends on where you are at in your journey and what your plans are for the next 5 to 10 years. I think
Right.
it's always better when you step back a little bit and try to look in the future to see what matches the best with your future goals, right?
Yeah.
And with that being said, there's the comfort, there's the fact that you can move quickly when you're renting, and you can save and do other things with your money that you can't necessarily do right away when you're buying a house within those first couple of years. But in the long run, right, buying a house makes sense. So we said you don't wait to buy real estate; you buy real estate, then wait. So,
Wait. Right.
if your plans of building some kind of wealth for your family, something that you can pass or something that you can tap into for in the future, real estate and buying your first house is really that big major step that is accessible to the majority of us if we play our cards right and take the necessary steps. So back to how to decide
They
when
said
to
not
buy a
to
house.
forget to speak Ewe or French. So
Okay.
let's start mixing these languages and see what
Oh,
we can
oh,
do.
goodness. All right. So yeah, if there's any specific questions, I'll take them into Mina. I'm gonna start stumbling here
All of
if I
us,
start
all of
switching back
us,
and forth. But
all of
all right,
us, all of us.
sure. So let's just say that the what is your why is where I always like to take it. What's your why when you're deciding to buy a house, right? Is your why to have a nice house, to have friends over, somewhere that you can have a big party all the time? Is it somewhere, it can be something practical. Do you need a basement because you're working from home? Do you have space that you can do your side business some in one of the bedrooms of the house, right? So just take it to your why, and when you look at it, especially um, 5 to 10 years, it helps you buying that first house, and how you buy that first house is going to determine is going to help you guide the decision as to which kind of house to buy, how you should buy it, and what some of those criteria would be. So before you decide to do that, I think just the nicest, right? How the house looks is not necessarily a factor to go by. Okay, ahoy ko ya play muni ahoy gan ke nyakpo le kwa me wa mesia meto a muni ahoy ke to la kpo be koko play ahoy gan pote pote alo e to la kpo be o muni enu won nécessairement ti o la kpo ke ngbela o decision
Babi
o se play
appelé à voilà.
donc ndo o la kpo parce que banque ke ngbela play ahoy banque wana calcul do sa la kpo gomeno da wara be est-ce que ahoy ko le ja play de nu ya galasio sous la play voix so yedia all right man I'm starting to lose it now. So to continue, the bank is not going to do the bank is not going to do the due diligence for you, right? The bank is going to tell you, you have this much. The bank is just going to look at what you have, what their rules are, and give you a pass or fail, and you have to ultimately take that back to what makes sense for you in the long run. So
Mm-hmm.
let me see here. So deciding that first house is going to depend a lot on where you are, which what's your financial health is, right? What kind of recurring debt you currently have. We talked a little bit about it last time. Your credit card debt, your student loans, your credit card debt being the one of the worst ones in terms of interest rates. Your car loan, things like that, that might not be in the best state, right? If you're
Yeah.
paying if you're paying out of the wazoo in interest, then you might want to consolidate some of those and get rid of some of the debt that you already have. Depending on how you buy your house, it can be a blessing or a curse, right? There's cheap money nowadays. We have not, most of us young ones, we have not been through a crash before, right? Since 2008, the housing market has been doing great, and it's on the up and up. So you can pretty much just buy it and wait, and hopefully you just wait around in a few years. You'll have, depending on where you are in the state, you'll have 10, 20, 30 grand in equity just because you made the decision to buy. So I'll say number one, check your financial health, check your credit, and a few other things and why, right? So you ask yourself, why are we doing this? Is buying a
Yeah.
house, are we doing this because we want to save some of the money now, put it towards the house, and build that equity so that in the future we can take it out and invest with, we can take it out and do business with, and whatever the case may be. But how you buy it, and I think we're gonna get a lot more into that as we go. So I'll save that.
So basically, non, Amérique pe mba décidé ben nan yo appelé à jouer parce que yo ron, à jouer les ron yo ron si yo. Ne on ton poste pe financièrement be afin que les à no pla jouer mortgage pe nous on les. Et puis appelé à jouer à mon mortgage à quoi quoi parce que ne ndégle la réantifier owe atui nende jofifia ça vient de tes
Ça
poches
vient de tes poches.
mba
Voilà.
nyibe renting compagnie a take en charge donc a mingba puju ahwe plebe nu meke nyibe amede wenti chama wedo alo o mleshi alo il y avait des décisions non bien basées définitivement sur nos finances. Et
Bien sûr.
j'espère que t'es regroupé Nyako plan viré.
Oui, 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 tout à fait. Uh, e nemi le puele ego que me enyibe bon ego que me chon la te pu eni o la te pu be okay yele tu fe ale ke le appartement me alo yele ho haya me voilà bon yeah yem le di la ve ple a de ke o la te no appartement me ke jim le me et puis s'il les me quoi donc on avait bon et là après même chose là nous me coco et donc on a vision qu'on doit y be en et à quoi que les play ba trova zu fena yo wa donc on calcule tout ben amuni inko la hoya me nyakpo po et ni et nous veto parce que
Ouais.
ne au play hoya ye au play akpa be wu ne ke la teno tunia doa anya bena ne nde play enuko la huetia wabe beblea honaga so eh no haya ho o la te yo me lava jano do no
Ah
akare
ouais, non. Yeah,
voilà.
effectivement. Ariella, before we move on to the next question, I want to remind everybody that our show is designed to entertain and inform, not to provide any financial advice. You should always consult your financial experts, accountant, tax expert, when it comes to your own personal finances. We are here sharing common knowledge, sharing information that we ourselves we may have gone through. So just get that out of the way. So Ariella,
Right.
let's go to the next questions because I don't want people about
Don't
mi ave kona me ma ve pla huelo nken ve pla ve va ti
That's
kona mo
right.
no c'est pas ce
don't
que
sue me, please don't sue me.
uh, so
All right. So the next question is how to calculate how much of a house you can afford. So
Yeah, so great question. Let's see. So when you're thinking about how much of a house you can afford, I'll just start off by saying, but often, oftentimes, depending on what your goal is, if your goal is to, let's say that you want to build something for the future, right? You want to buy a house that's going to go up, and you can afford it. You can build some equity so that in the future you can use that money for something else, right? Because I like us to always look at it that way. Because if we don't, if it's just for the comfort, we're talking pretty large balances here, right? The average home in America is somewhere in the three, four, 500,000, right? And Omaha we're a little more fortunate, but so because you're dealing with such high amounts, it's very important to go back to your why. All right.
mm,
So right, and with that being said, don't buy the nicest house on the block. I think that's just the easiest way to think about that because, well, let's think about it this way. I learned this thing just a little metaphor here. Let's say that you're driving down the road and you're gonna stop by and buy gas. Are you going to stop by the one that is a few cents higher, or are you gonna go to the ones that is the cheapest, or all the ones just because at the end of the day, just because they're right there, and it's a few cents are going to make a big difference is at the end of the, is pretty much all I'm trying to say there. So
yeah.
if no one is going to come and well, most of the time somehow they're able to do it with reward points or whatever the case may be. No one's going to come over and then take over that mortgage for you, because I like us to always think about the exit strategy when we're buying a house, right? Let's say something happens, right? These are very big balances that we're carrying on our credit, so we have to think about what happens, and if you need to get out of the situation, how would you then go about getting rid of that? So if you buy the nicest house, what has happened back in '07 and before that, the nicest house is probably going to be the most expensive one. And what to say? What happens if the crash happens while you're holding the house, right? Was to say that you buy your nicest house, and all of a sudden there are some changes in the market, right? Actually, two interesting things happened since our last conversations when we were talking about interest rates being at all-time low. They had actually gone up since the last time we talked. Right?
Mm, yeah.
Slightly, right? I mean, it's still a very great times to buy, but just put that into perspective. If you go ahead and buy the biggest house, nicest house on the block, then let's say that something was to happen, then you are not in a position to get out of it without taking a loss, essentially, right? So I like us to be very cautious on how we calculate how much house we can afford. Very easy trick that I like to use as well is look at your current rent, right? If you can find a house that is around the price that you're paying in rent, right, with some reserves, obviously, like that implies that you haven't been paying rent late, or you've been able to afford it, right? If you're comfortable with a certain rent amount, then and you have some savings, I would say six up to 6 months of your mortgage, I would say that you'll do just fine buying a house. Because, well, most of the time, most of the things that we worry about the most breaking in a house do not just break like that, because you go through a whole inspection process before you close on a house. So they're just not just, your roof is not just going to start leaking the next month after there's an inspector that came and did everything that it could do to make sure that you're buying a solid house, right? But
Right.
that's why the 6 months reserves and emergency funds is for, just in case
Mhm.
something happens, right? And when you're talking to someone like me, just going back to why you wouldn't want to buy the nicest house on the block is, if you buy a house that needs a little bit of work, right? The beautiful thing about buying a house is that needs a little bit of work, you can customize it to how you like it, right?
Mhm.
We don't even talking about investing per se here, right? Let's say that you buy a house, the paint is a little uh, chipped off, or whatever it is, it's a little faded, and you really like some blue, some gray that you found somewhere else. Then the beautiful thing is, if you go ahead and save those funds and do that while you're living in the house, now you're increasing the value of your house, right? So whereas you can spend, let's say you spend $1,000 to do the paint on the house, all of a sudden now your house is worth 5,000 more, 10,000 more, depending on how the market is going, right? You either go buy that one. I mean, if pain is that much of an importance to you, then go ahead and buy the nicest one today. But I think there's an opportunity that is left on the table if
Right.
if you go ahead, if you don't want to put in that little bit of work. So
Mhm.
back to the actual solid numbers here. Unfortunately, there isn't going to be a mathematical equation that I can throw at you to make that easy to target a number. But if you use the trick of staying around your rent price, right, making sure that that was comfortable for you while you're renting, then more than likely you're going to be comfortable when you have that as a mortgage payment. Another thing that the bank does actually, they calculate something that is called a debt to income ratio, which is they take into account all the debt that you have coming in. Let's say that you have a credit card debt, whatever you owe every month that you have to pay, and then they're going to divide that by how much gross income you're bringing in, well, how much your paycheck is, right? Whatever recurring fees you have, it saves child support, it saves student loans,
Right.
whatever, auto loan, all that. They're going to tally that up and divide it by, uh, they're going to divide that by your gross income. And we're talking
Mhm.
before the United States government take out
Take all your
their
money.
taxes, right?
Take all your
Yeah, all your
money.
money, pretty much. But and and if you're going as far as if you're going FHA, they'll allow you to do up to 57%. which can be great when you think about it that way. But that means that, let's say that you bring in a a thousand, right? Let's say that you have $1,000 coming in, and they do the math and they say that, okay, you can do up to is that 570, whatever that is. Let's say that it's
Mm-hmm.
570. They can lend you up to, with all your other expenses combined, up to 570.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it that way, that is a pretty unsafe way if you max that out, right? Because they're not taking into consideration how much you owe in taxes,
Yeah.
right? So they say, okay, you have your paycheck says that you get paid, I don't know, 20, 30, $40 an hour. They're just gonna take that number, they're gonna use up all the recurring debt you have, and they say up to 50, 57%, uh, we're going to lend that money to you so that you can buy that house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was while doing this, I was actually surprised to go on. I went on CNN Money, and I saw that they said that if you're making 50,000 per year, you can afford up to a $300,000 mortgage, which was insane for me to think about.
That is
Yes,
not
this
true. You
that
cannot
well,
afford that.
right. So your affordability is going to, exactly, there. Yes, they're assuming that you're putting 20% down, right? Which means that yes, your mortgage is going to be down, but still, I would say that that is crazy talk. You
Crazy
don't
talk.
ever want to buy that much real estate. You always want to buy something that will be around the price that you were paying when you're renting, ideally.
Hmm.
So
So
that is
we
how,
have somebody said that's a lie. Yes, it's a lie. So we have a
yeah.
question from one of the audience member. Edvish Madison asked, "What is an appropriate down payment for a $400,000 house?"
Good question. And just like any of these great questions, the answer is going to be something around the lines of it depends, right?
Yeah,
So the less down payment you put down, right, the more your mortgage is going to be.
mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So right, depend on what you can get away with. I would say that if you are in a financially healthy situation, try to put down as little as you can. All right, try to put down as little as you can. That means that you have savings, right? Your mortgage is going to be $400,000 house. I think your mortgage is going to be around 2,000, something like that. So if you want to leverage that high, you got to think about it, right? Now, does this mortgage payment, does that, with all the money that I have coming in, all the savings that I have, uh, let me do this. A simple rule that I try to do is I want my first paycheck that I get, and then this is a very conservative, right? Let's say that I get 2 weeks worth of paycheck. I like my mortgage to be around half of that, if possible. And this is net. Now, so do your math, right? So this implies that, yes, so buying your, after when you put these numbers together, you're going to find out that you buying a house is actually a pretty tedious process, and it's actually quite hard to find one that is going to match these numbers because you want to play very safely,
Yep.
right? If you think about it that way, if let's say that if your first paycheck, right, you get two paychecks, you get paid bi-weekly, or if you have a business, let's say that you have money that comes in every month, if you can afford your mortgage with half of that, I think you've
Mm,
built enough cushion for you to
mm,
be able to weather the storms, right? If you have
mhm.
2,000 coming in every month, if you have a $500 mortgage, then I think you're doing all right, right?
Right.
If you need to
Mhm.
put down a little more so that you can come down to that, then you have to think about it that way, right? You have to think about how much can I if let's say that something happens, if I'm over leveraged, if I buy the nicest house on the block, am I over that quarter, right? That quarter of my monthly income, right? That means if I get half, which is the paycheck, I divide it by half, that should be able to cover that. The lesser you are towards that, if it's even less than that, then I think you're doing much better. Uh, so that's a
So
simple
we
rule that I
have
use.
another question as well, and I think this is a really good question. Je suis Togo ask, do you look at the monthly payment or the interest or the house or the cost of the house itself?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So good question, Confrère, je suis Togo. So I would say that you have to look at all of that, right? You have to look at
Mhm,
all of those because the play together, right? So the monthly payment is going to the monthly payment is going to be a combination of what the house costs, the interest,
and sure.
and how much you actually pay down, right? So I would say that if you focus on the last two, let's say that you have a $400,000 house, the interest rate is let's say 3%, right? That is going to essentially determine what your monthly payment is, right?
Mhm,
So if you focus on those two numbers with the you're focusing on how much your house costs, you're not buying the nicest house on the block, so that means that your house is not going to be the most expensive one on the block, right? And your interest rate also, the interest rate that the bank gives you is also going to depend somehow on your credit score. It's going to depend on how much debt you have and all that. You get the best interest rates if you have the best credits, if you have the best credit score. So if you take into consideration if you break it down, if it's easier to look at the monthly payment, then you have to again go back to, well, considering everything else that I have going on, right?
mhm,
Am I
mhm.
overextended? Am I doing that quarter calculation to say that, hey, I am only spending half of my my biweekly paycheck to cover this. Yeah, are you overextended? If it's more than that, right? If your house costs more and the interest is higher, then your monthly payment is also going to be high. So you might end up being out of that range of what you can actually afford.
Yeah.
So I would say you have to look at those three
Yeah.
in
I think
summary
that's
there.
a really good question.
Yeah.
And yeah, I share the same feeling that you need to look at all three. And it also is a lot of different factors that goes into what you think is more important for you at that moment. Okay. Okay. So he rephrases his question. Say, if the house is an asset versus a liability, what of the three do you look at? Because one is always more important than the other.
Absolutely. Okay, I got you. So we are talking in over here today, right? So your house, if you live, we're talking about a house that you're gonna live in. So if the
Mm-hmm.
house that you're living in, right, you have to understand that it's always going to be some kind of liability because it doesn't generate you any money, and you have to pay that money without it bringing any income into your pocket any every month that goes by. So that's essentially a liability. So if your house is a liability, and you have to look at the your interest rate when you are is front loaded. That means you have to pay a lot of it at the beginning, right? So if you take into consideration what the number is going to, and in the long run, your interest rate payments are going to be substantial. It's hard to pick one factor without looking at all three of them. If I go ahead and buy if I buy $1 million house, but my interest rate is only 2%, right? I'm not gonna say just because my interest rate is so low that it's all of a sudden an asset to me, right? If but however, if I buy a $500,000 house or whatever is under my affordability number, and the interest rate is let's say five, right? And depend on whatever other debt I have and what their interest is, then at that point I'm still in trouble. Then I have to look at the whole picture. It's hard to pick one factor to go there to say one or the other. I would say you have to look at a combination just to play safe there. Uh,
Wow, that was a really insightful answer, and I hope that answers your Sweet Togo's question.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. It's not a one thing. I don't think per se anyway. But I love to hear.
Yeah, so right now we're actually going to go into our 30-second break, and then we're going to go over and finish up with the rest of the questions.
Or
Salut tout le monde, moi c'est Emilia Banks et aujourd'hui j'aimerais vous inviter sur TEP Direct. Alors, c'est quoi TEP Direct? TEP Direct, c'est une plateforme qui offre à tous les Togolaises et Togolaises qui ont un business à s'inscrire et à se faire découvrir par le public togolais aux États-Unis. Voilà, donc je suis sur TEP Direct, j'ai mon business enregistré là-bas. Et que vous soyez client ou que vous soyez business owner, j'aimerais vous inviter à aller faire un tour sur TEP Direct. Merci.
And we are back for more questions. So let's just get right into it with the next questions that we have. So we were talking about finances. So let's go to the finance question. How to choose a lender.
How do you choose a lender for your house, right?
Yes,
I
for
would say just like anything else, right? You have to test out a few. You have to call a few different places, just like we do everything else that we're shopping around for. We Africans, we're Togolese. We know how it is when you go to Asigame. You have to shop around and see who's offering you the best rates. I know that it can be personally, it can be intimidating the first time you're dealing with these big banks. You're asking for, hey, I'm asking to borrow up to 200,000, 400,000. So it can be a little intimidating to not really ask for what you want when you are shopping around with these lenders. So I would say when you choose your lender, it comes down to the one that is going to offer you the best rates. And normally, and that means that you are quote unquote not going to your big banks. Usually, the community ones, the smaller ones, they care about the community. They want to invest in that particular community, so they offer the better rates for you to be able to shop in that. For you to be able to do business with them, they want your money means a lot more to them, right? If you give 1,000 to someone who only has 100, it's gonna mean a lot to them than if you're giving 1,000 to someone who has 1,000,000. So
Mhm.
if you look at it that way, then those smaller community banks are more willing to work with you. I would say, uh, look at your rates, make sure you're not overextended on your someone that is willing to help you through the numbers, someone that is willing to go through all the disclosures with you. You want to get educated, right? One thing
Mhm.
that I do when I'm just interviewing anyone, just to a partnership or whatever the case may be, I would ask a very obvious question that I would expect them to steer me back in the right direction, right? Let's say that I was trying to go buy something and I say, hey, let's say that you ask your mortgage banker, hey, I have, you're saying that this is the best rate we can offer you is 4%. Ask them, hey, do you think I should go with someone who's offering me 2%? Like, is there any advantages to go with with someone that is doing 4%? And that's
Mm.
just, I mean, if they find a way to say, you know what, I think you should actually really do this. Well, they're gonna give you some words of caution, right? They're gonna say, well, make sure you check everything else. But if everything equals and they still tell you and they still try to find a reason to tell you to stick with them, then I get a little suspicious, right?
Yeah.
So I try to ask this question that would say, if someone can point me in the right direction, then you know, regardless of whether it's benefiting them, then I know that it might be then they're not well the work the they paid based on how much they lend you and the fees that are charged, right? So at the end of the day, yes, there's a big part of that is they're incentivized to sell you these, so they'll try to get you at whatever cost. But always shop around, just like anything else. You have more leverage than you think you do. Find one and use that against the second one. Hey, so and so bank is willing to do this for me. What can you guys do? Take your time and shop around. So.
An audience member has a question, but I have a follow-up question to this one when we
Sure.
were talking about this. What would be one thing in your experience before you you go to a lender before you start shopping around, what would be one thing that you know as a buyer you should have in your pocket before you go shopping around?
Yeah, very good question. So I would say that one that is pretty good to have is to know around what your credit score is. And the reason why I ask that is your lender, what they're going to quickly do is run your credit to
Mm-hmm.
see, to see where you land, because they'll offer the best, or whatever rates, the rates that they can offer you are bound to that credit score. So if you already know your credit score, that helps tremendously, because you can say, hey, I have so and so credit, I have 600 something, I have 600 so and so credit. Do not run my credit yet, or I would just like to see how much I can afford. Right? Have a list of what all your payments, all everything that you have due at the end of the month. Right? If you have a list of
Mm-hmm.
that and you say, hey, I'm in this scenario. These are all the things that I have. What do you think you can do with this? Or this
Mm-hmm.
is how much the house that I'm looking to buy is going to cost, right? Always try to work out is how would say theoretical situations, right? Hypothetical situations, to
Mm-hmm.
try, and while you're doing your shopping around, yeah, so you don't get your credit hit every time you want to shop around, and get just when you're just looking around, you don't want to be getting dinged, because those are hard inquiries and they will drag your credit down.
Right. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. So let's go to the questions from the audience. 15 or 30 years, what do you suggest?
Good
And I
question.
see a lot of response to that question, but let's hear from you, and then I can read
Yeah.
off a couple of the suggestions from our other audience members.
Right. So this is another thing that it depends on your level of your discipline and what your vision is, right? So I would say that someone like me, I would always go for the 30 years one, just because I am very conservative with how I allocate the rest of my money, right? That is money that I'm going to put towards other investments per se, or that is money that I'm going to use to get a better return. The advantage that we have in getting into something so low is for lower mortgages, is the fact that we can get them spread out over the long term. So if you're doing a 15-year mortgage, I think this is very going to depend on what, and on your personal agenda, right? And what you're going to do with that difference of how much you can afford, right? If you're someone that let's say that, if I and depends on your next 5 year situation as well, right? If this is my dream house, I've gotten it, I know I'm not going anywhere, I'll definitely try to get a lower mortgage, I'm sorry, a lower term, a shorter term, so that I can pay off as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, you want to be able to put interest rates will, if you look at your schedule of your payment, right? If a house costs you 100,000, at the end of the 30 years, you're probably going to pay just that much in interest, right? So if you can afford to make more payments towards that equity, I would say take the 30 years, right? Because that way you're not stuck with, oh, now I have to make, because if you have the difference between a 15-year mortgage and a 30 years
I
is
see.
going to
Okay,
be
I
about
think I just
500
got
and
what
so,
you're saying. I think I just got what you're saying.
right?
So
So
what you're saying is
yeah,
to take the 30 years,
take the 30
but
years,
you can afford to make a payment as if you have a 15 years. Take the
right?
30 years and make that payment towards the principal.
Absolutely, that's right. That
Mm,
way you're not locked into 15 year. It's going to be quite a big difference, right? And if you're also waiting to afford a 15-year mortgage, you might end up waiting a long time to buy a house. You might spend a long time renting. You might spend a long time just wasting money while you haven't bought, right? So it's going to depend on what your level of discipline is. If you know that you're someone that likes to shop around, and if that money is in your bank account, is going to go towards a nice bag, is going to go towards your nice hair, right, ladies? We love you for your hair. uh, but ultimately, right, it's going to depend on your level of discipline. But I think a safe way to do that is if you take the 30, then make sure that you're paying as much as you can towards principal. I think the 15-year
Mm-hmm.
might tie you down. So again, it depends on who
I
you are
don't think
and
I
what your
ever
goal is.
looked at it that way, where it's like the 15-year, it's not giving you room for flexibility.
Yeah.
But if you do the 30 years and you are still able to make more payment, just do it. But, just in case in the future something happened, you never know, you are unable to make that extra
Right,
payment, you are still making your regular payment and you are okay. Like,
right. And one very interesting math that, just speaking to that question is, if you make an extra payment in towards your principal every month, right? That's you're pretty much paying almost double your mortgage. You're going to essentially eliminate 11 years off of your mortgage, right? Some crazy number like that. Yeah, I think actually you might not have to do that every month. Just a few times a year, you might be able to take down 11 years. You might pay your mortgage as early as 11 years early, right?
mhm,
So just paying over, I believe the number is with a one extra payment a year, or one extra payment every month, something like that. But
mhm.
I personally like that, that flexibility. It's going to
Yeah.
depend a lot on where you're allocating the rest of the money towards, what your goal is, right? If this is my dream house, right? If you're buying, right, and if you look at that, it goes back to my vision, right, which is, or my why, which is, well, I don't want to buy the nicest house on the block today, but I like to buy the nicest house on the block someday, right?
Someday. Mhm.
Yeah.
So if with that in mind, then that means that I'm making very little towards my mortgage. I'm using that money to fix it up, make it look a little nicer. I'm just spending that money around, or I'm using it to do other things, or I'm saving it towards something else, right? I'm saving it maybe towards a bigger house, but that is also not going to be the nicest one, right? So I'm getting to the next level. We're going to talk a little more about investing while being in an ownership situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, that ties back into that.
Yeah.
That's good.
And again, like we said, we are not giving you guys financial.
Do your homework.
Do
Do
your
your
homework.
homework.
Do your
I did
homework.
mine. Do your
Everybody,
homework.
Yeah.
everybody is living a different life. Your situation is different than mine. It's different than Mr. Wonderful's. It's different than Ariella's. So do your own homework. We are just here having discussion, sharing information. So let's get into the next question. We are almost at the end of the show, so I want to really tackle this question, and from your perspective, and as not only as a homeowner, but also just a little part of the investment portion, right? Which we're gonna get into at a later time. We're gonna come back and talk about real estate investment. But what would you consider the bottom line in the home buying process?
Mm.
Yeah. So bottom line, the reason why this is such an important topic for, especially us immigrants, minorities, whatever your situation is this is one of the most reachable ways for us to build some net worth for a family. All right. So this is not all of us are going to be able to spend money and or start a business that is going to make millions, right? However, buying that first house, they say buying that first house will change your life. And how will that happen? Well, interestingly enough, it's been, the stock market has been doing pretty crazy over the past few months, and I think the timing, right? Personally, right? The past week has reaffirmed to me why real estate is where I like to play my game, just because I haven't done my homework as well as I do on real estate as on the stock market, right? And I've gotten spanked a couple of times in the market, right? But the thing with real estate is you are dealing with, if you're I looked at this math is, if you, let's say that your net worth is under $1 million, right? Let's say that you buy a $300,000 house, You put however much you put towards it. Let's say that you put 10%, and then your house appreciates at 4% over, let's say, 5 to 10 years, right? That 4%, if you look that up, I think that did the math was in 7 years, that 4%, the $300,000 house might end up being worth, let's say, 394,000 or 395,000, something like that. Now you've made probably you started off with let's say 10 grand, and you've made, because you're able to use your 10,000, buy a $300,000 house, or maybe, I'm using simple numbers here. You've grown that up to 94,000 in your net worth, right? It's going to be crazy hard to save that much money in 7 years, right?
Yeah.
If you take 10,000 and you put in the stock market, is it going, let's say that the best, if you look at whatever, I'm just using the stock market now because it's been so hot. If you look at most of the better companies in 5 years, or let's say, or 10 years, you'll be glad if it makes up to, if you double your money or even triple your money, right? It's very rare that in 5 to 10 years you're going to make, now we went from 10,000 to 90 some thousand. That's a 900% return.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I don't know how many stocks you're gonna buy that you'll buy for 10,000, and it's going to, in 7 years, become 100,000, just like that. If let's say that you let's even say that you get that lucky, and it goes, and now you have a stock that is worth that much. The 94,000 that you have, let's say that now you've made 94,000 in your house and 94,000 in the stock market. The
Mm-hmm.
94,000 that you've made because you lived in the house is completely tax free when you decide to sell this house now, right? Up to 250,000 for singles, and 500,000 if you're a couple, right? So 94,000, just because you bought this house, you can take it cash free when you decide to sell it, or use that money to do something else with it. If you make the same amount in the stock market, that money you have to pay interest on. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to pay taxes on, right? You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
have to pay a long-term tax gain on it, right? So it is the most reachable, the most accessible way for us to build wealth, if we are depend on what your net worth is. But if you look at that simple math there, when just because you bought a house, waited for it to appreciate 4% over 7 years, now you have 100,000 worth, right? And you can sell that and make all that money uh, tax free, which is the best two words ever. You don't have that luxury when you are actually in the stock market and playing in that realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another bottom line, another trick here that that I think would be great for parents, right? Uh, that money now, right? 7 years, that's money that you can use towards your children's college tuition, right? That's just because you're able to make that sacrifice up front. And the thing is, the good thing is, you can keep milking it. You can access that equity in the house, right? You don't necessarily have to sell the house, right? Just because you have the house and it's worth that much, you don't necessarily have to sell it to get access to that increased value in it. We talked about that a little bit
Mm-hmm.
last couple of weeks when we talked about, using your equity to invest, right? You don't actually have to sell it. Just because you bought rights, you didn't buy the nicest house on the block, right? Because if you buy the nicest house on the block, if the market comes down a little bit, then now you're bottom up, right? But if you buy the one that is not quite the nicest one, a few years go by, right? Let's say that even drops, you're still doing okay because you bought undervalue, right? And now you waited, you were a disciplined homeowner, you made the right investments. Along the line, you're gonna have costs, right? You're going to have things that happen. The good thing about that is, most of those investments, actually, most of those expenses towards your house should help increase the value of your house when that time comes around, right? Let's say that your roof, right? If you look at it today, right? Let's say that your roof is leaky today. Let's say you need a brand new roof. Now you're looking at $10,000 fee. Yes, that's a pretty hard pill to swallow, right? But let's say that again, you did there was an inspection. You didn't just buy a house that you would know that you're buying a house that needs this kind of roof, right? Let's say that that still happens to you in 7, 8 years after you bought that, right? Now, do you think when you've appreciated, let's say that you've made your house has appreciated 50 to 100 grand, or let's say that, hey, this roof has been changed within the last 5 years, right? That
Yeah.
is a selling point when that time comes around,
Yeah.
right? So just a few simple things to consider when it comes to that. There's always going to be a nicer house than yours. So
Always.
don't, if you start if you get into chasing what your neighbor's doing, then you might end up underwater pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are
Yeah.
that's the point. If there's any more questions, we'll love to keep chatting uh,
Um,
with my people here.
so we don't have any more questions from us, and it looks like we don't have any more questions from the audience as well. So with that being said, we want to just take the time again to thank you for being here with us and sharing your knowledge, sharing what you know with us is very much appreciated, and we cannot wait to have you back here in June to really dive
Uh,
into the real estate investment
oh
because
boy,
we want to be rich like you, Mr. Wonderful. I want to be on your
stop,
level. So teach me
stop.
your ways. I want to be at
I
your level, big money
I eat
level.
a lot of
Right.
peanut butter sandwiches,
I bet
lot
if
of
it's
saving.
peanut butter sandwich,
Oh wow.
at your level, I will eat peanut butter sandwich. Joe. We want to
Thank
be.
you. I'm humbled.
Very excited for that series to come on. It's actually a
I am
whole
too.
series on investment. So we are
Mm,
going to talk about stock market. We're going to talk about real estate investment. We're going to talk about business investment, franchises, all of those good things. So we have plenty good stuff coming up. So Mr. Wonderful, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being
thank
here.
Thank
you.
you so much, Clarice. Thank you,
Appreciate
Ariella. Thank you, guys.
So we're gonna
Oh,
let you
happy,
go. You have
happy
some.
belated Women's International Women's Day, you
Thank
ladies.
you.
Good. I had to
You.
sneak that in there somewhere.
Thank you. We thank our foremothers that fought for us to have the rights that we have now. Still not over. We're still fighting for some, but we will get there. Some days we support
Absolutely.
our counterparts like you, Mr. Wonderful, like our wonderful men in the community that are supporting us and
Thank
fighting
you.
for our rights. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the support. Um, part three, no part three for you. Somebody tried to say no part three. No part three. Okay, so Mr. Wonder, we're gonna let you go. And à plus. See you in
All right.
June. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Ariella.
Wow. That
I
was
like
so insightful. Like
Ariella.
I'm this close to buying a house.
Ewa, Ewa. My,
I
my
feel like I'm so ready.
See, this is why we say, I beg, go do your homework, please. Don't come here saying you are this close to buying a house. I beg, go do your homework, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Next week, we have, what do we have next week? We have TEP Member Corner.
Yep.
And our guest for next week is going to be Miss Esther Akusa. Mrs. actually, of Queenette LLC. So she's going to be here with us next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, 7 p.m. Omaha time, and 5 p.m. California time. We're going to
Mm,
have some chat with her, just learn about her business, what she does, and see some of her products. So come to support our sister. And like always, I'm Clarice
and
in the
I'm Ariella Lawson.
lesson. Until next time, stay connected and let's build our community.
That's
Okay?
right.
Bye.